Many thanks for joining us on the program. I'm Okpayemi Owoshin. We begin with business news. The Nigerian government says it has shifted its focus to the renewable energy sector to enhance supply to the education, health, agriculture and rural community, as well as the transportation sectors. It also says that deploying mini-grids to solve energy access problems in rural communities through the EAD project to benefit 80 million Nigerians who are estimated to lack electricity, thereby creating sustainable economics and reducing rural-urban drift in Nigeria. Speaking at a stakeholders engagement workshop organized by the Rural Electrification Agency in Abuja, the Minister of Power Adebayo Adelabo says off-grid electricity supply has become a key component of the government's plan to bridge the electricity supply gap in the country. As part of this strategy, the government has also earmarked another $700 million from the African Development Bank to fund the Desert to Power project, which seeks to enhance the abundant sunlight in the northern region of the country to generate renewable energy for communities. We'll go on a break now and be back with corporate stories. Welcome back. Dangote Petroleum Refinery has reduced the price of its premium motor spirit product from 970 naira to 899 naira 50 kobo per litre as a holiday promo in the Yuletide season. According to a statement by the Group Chief Branding and Communications Officer of the Dangote Group, Anthony Chijena, the company is also giving a special offer in which consumers are allowed to purchase an additional litre of fuel on credit for every litre bought on a cash basis. Chijena noted that the price reduction is aimed at easing transport costs for Nigerians during the festive period. The refinery also expresses gratitude to Nigerians for their continued support as the country enters the festive season. We'll go on a break now, but when Money Matters return, we'll be discussing the 2025 budget. I'll bring you details of this after the short break. Welcome back. President Bola Tinubu made a second budget presentation before a joint session of the National Assembly on Wednesday, December 18, 2024. Now, presenting the 2025 appropriation bill to Parliament, President Tinubu unveiled a budget estimate of 47.96 trillion naira, with a crude oil benchmark price of $75 per barrel, daily oil production of 2.06 million barrels per day, and an exchange rate of 1,500 naira to the US dollar for the 2025 fiscal year. According to the President, the proposed expenditure for the 47.96 trillion budget reflects the serious challenges faced by Nigerians and contain key reforms necessary to address them. Take a listen to what is said.
In year 2025, we are targeting 34.8 trillion naira in revenue to fund the budget. Government expenditure in the same year is projected to be 47.90 million naira, including a trillion naira, including 15.81 trillion naira for debt servicing. I promise we have to bring this down. A total of 13.0 trillion naira, or 3.89% of GDP, will make up the budget deficit. That is achievement. This is an ambitious but necessary budget to secure our future. The budget projects inflation will decline from the current rate of 34.6% to 15% next year, while the exchange rate will improve from approximately 1,700 naira per dollar to 1,500 naira, and a base crude oil production assumption of, say, 2.06 Yeah, 2.5 million naira per day.
Now let's discuss the 2025 budget proposal further. Financial analyst Carlo Aja now joins me on the program. Thank you for joining me on the program, Mr. Aja. Now, what are your initial thoughts on the 2025 budget proposal titled the Restoration Budget? How well does it align with Nigeria's current economic challenges and development goal? And is it really a restoration budget?
Well, it's a very, very optimistic budget, right? They are planning to sell a lot of crude oil and hopefully to get monies in to then pay down debts, to pay salaries, but a lot of very, very rosy projections. In terms of the name of the budget, right, we're not really spending a lot. If you look at the budget in dollar terms, it actually has a reduction from last year. If you converted the billions of naira to dollars, it's actually a reduction. But Nigeria needs to spend a lot more on infrastructure, especially power and roads, to allow the economy start to create those jobs, to create consumption locally. So even though the budget looks like a lot of money, we're not really spending a lot. And even where we're going to spend the bulk of the funds is going to go to debt service and also to salaries. So not a lot in infrastructure that would really grow that economy and provide that stimulus that Nigeria really needs at this time. So I would say it's a very, very optimistic budget, but we're not maybe there yet, if I would put it that way.
Okay, so the budget outlines a deficit of 13.08 trillion naira. Now, how sustainable is this level of borrowing, and what could be the long-term impact on Nigeria's economy, bearing in mind that we are facing challenges at the moment?
Yeah, that's a big problem because with the revenues we're getting, it's not enough to pay for all the expenses that are in that budget. So we have to borrow, create the debt, and then create a deficit. And the problem is that we're borrowing in foreign currency. So this year alone, for 2024, we borrowed 2 billion for 2024. This is outside the 2025 budget. We're also going to keep on borrowing in this year's budget in dollars and naira. So this creates a huge strain on the resources of the economy. Look at it this way. If we meet 100% of the revenue target in 2025, all that money, all that revenue goes to just two sources: to repay the debt and to pay salaries. That's in 2025. So that tells you how much Nigeria is owing. That all the oil monies that we're going to make, all the VAT, all the customs revenues, if all that comes in, it can only fund debt service and salaries. We have to keep on borrowing to build roads and to do other things. So the debt is a big, big, big debt trap for Nigeria. It pulls us back because we have to spend a lot of our resources just to service that debt, and it's in dollars, so we can't print it out. We have to earn it. So that's a big, big problem and a red flag for Nigeria right there.
Well, you just mentioned revenue generation. So the government has set an ambitious growth target for revenue generation of about 34.82 trillion naira, which is a very big figure. So now what steps do you think the government needs to take to meet these targets?
Well, bulk of that revenue is going to come from crude oil. That's why I'm saying it's a very, very ambitious budget. We have to export the numbers, then we have to hope that the oil prices stay high for that revenue to come in. So it's a very, very ambitious target that we've set for ourselves. So that's why I'm a bit worried. The non-oil side of Nigeria's economy is not really generating enough revenues. So if you look at the agricultural exports, the solid minerals, we're not really getting a lot of revenues from there. We're really doing 89% crude oil and gas. So anything that happens globally, if the US starts to pump out more oil, if there's peace in Ukraine and the Russians start to pump out crude oil, that affects our output and of course would affect our income. So the revenue target, because it's only tied really primarily to crude oil, is a big problem. The VAT, the customs duties, they are all non-oil. But in one way or the other, they depend on the revenue flows that come to Nigeria from the exports and sale of crude oil and gas. So we're a mono economy and we depend on imports, and that's a big problem. We're exporting crude and we're importing PMS. So anything that affects our revenues makes costs go up. Again, on that red flag for Nigeria in that instance.
All right, so let's talk about our debt servicing. So according to the budget, the allocation for debt servicing is at 15.81 trillion naira. How do you think the government can balance this with its other priorities such as infrastructure, education, and security?
This is the problem, right? Because we've borrowed internationally from Eurobonds, which we have to pay. We can't default on those Eurobonds, and they're in foreign currency, which means they cannot print. We can't do ways and means. So that means when we sell crude oil, when we sell gas, when we do remittances, when we earn foreign revenues, all that money just goes out the door back to pay back the Euro bonds and all the other loans that we have that are in foreign currency. This is the big problem. We are earning money, we are pumping more oil, but money is going out to service the debt. The local debt that we have in Naira, of course, are also being eaten up by the local revenues that we also make in Naira. So the government is going to keep on borrowing. 2024, December, we borrowed 2 billion to fund the 2024 budget. We're going to borrow record levels again in 2025 to fund the budget. The answer should be an austerity budget where we cut down expenses instead of trying to spend to meet those expenditure needs that we have to start to cut down to reduce the size of the government, to reduce the scope of what the federal government wants to do alone. Devolve to states, diversify to the private sector so the federal government is spending less and then has less need to borrow to provide those services. That's just going to be the answer. We can't keep on borrowing to fund a bloated budget. We have to start to cut down the size of the budget so we can at least afford from our own organic revenues without borrowing. So the big thing to watch there as well.
It's been about It's been about 18 months since President Bola Tinubu became president, and the economy has seen a lot of changes and challenges since that time. So, while the president was presenting the 2025 budget, he emphasized that the reforms he has introduced and the Apex Bank has introduced over the past 18 months have been yielding a positive result. Now, based on the budget proposal, do you think these reforms have been impactful enough to stabilize Nigeria's economy?
Well, the key reforms he has done is the removal of PMS subsidy
Okay.
and, of course, the float of the naira, i.e., to decouple the naira. I think those are very, very good policies. When he came in, Nigeria could not afford either the PMS subsidy or the peg of the naira to the dollar. We couldn't afford it. So he decoupled the peg and he refused the subsidy. What that has done is that it has allowed more revenues to come to the Nigerian government, the Nigerian Federation. So federal, state, and local government have gotten more revenues because there's no fuel subsidy. It's not just the federal government, but the other arms of the government have now got to spend that extra revenue on the people. We've seen a minimum wage bill being passed, which means our revenues are going to go up at the household level. But I'm not sure those revenues have started to trickle out to the family, so they get that extra funds to be able to survive. The problem really is that revenues have come in, but the costs have gone up. Inflation has gone up to about 38% and it has stayed there. Energy costs have gone up and we haven't had the palliatives from the CNG buses and all that. So while costs have gone up, while revenues have gone up, costs have also gone up, and it has sort of removed the benefit to the households. To the government, yes, they're making money, but to the households, not really a lot of money. The one I'm looking forward to is the tax reforms. I think with the tax reforms, it gives a lot of exemptions to the common man, to the small tax earner, to the small guy that is working. So we can see the government also make more monies from the tax reforms, and then the people that earn less pay less in taxes. So that becomes more stimulative to the economy. That's going to be another game changer if we can get that done. It encourages business, that allows the economy to become more productive. So I like the policies. I hope the tax one gets passed. And I think he's now going to be on his way to right-sizing the economy for growth in the future.
Let's talk about inflation. It's currently at 34.6%, according to the report released by the National Bureau of Statistics for November. Now, but there's a target for inflation to reduce from 34.6% to 15% by next year, that's 2025. Do you believe this goal is achievable? Because 34.6% to 15% is a huge gap. Do you believe this goal is achievable, and what measures would be most effective in achieving this goal?
Yeah, that's a tall order because inflation in Nigeria is a food issue. We
Yes.
have high inflation because food prices have gone high, and why they've gone high? Because of insecurity in the Middle Belt and the North, where the bulk of our tubers and our grains come from. So because we don't have that huge supply, prices have gone up. So to fix inflation, you've got to fix the insecurity across those food growing areas. And I don't think we can get that done in 12 months. Even if we could stop the banditry in 12 months, you still have to plant the food, harvest it, process it, and get it to market. So I don't see that happening in the next 12 months. It might abate, but that's not going to happen. We had a policy to say we're going to import duty-free food. That hasn't happened. If we had done that, we would have seen a reduction in inflation today. But that has not happened. And that was passed way, way, way back, I believe, in the second quarter of 2024, but still hadn't happened. If you want to reduce inflation, you've got to focus on what causes inflation. That's the high cost of food. The government isn't doing anything in that regard. So just raising interest rates by the CBN will not really bring down inflation. You've got to allow food to come in cheaper on a short-term basis in the immediate term, and then focus on insecurity in the long term to ensure that there's more food produced and it's taken to the market in the south. And that takes down prices, and of course, inflation also goes down.
So while managing inflation is a critical component of economic stability, and another important factor of the government strategy for recovery is the energy sector. One of the key projections in the 2025 budget is an increase in crude oil production to 2.06 million barrels per day. How significant is this target in supporting the economic recovery, especially with volatility in global oil prices?
Mm. Yeah, again, that's nothing we really don't control, right? So we can control output, but the prices, remember, it's going to be two of them, the output and the pricing. We say we're at 1.8. Let's assume we're there at 1.8, right? In 2005, we're at 2.2. So just at 1.8, we're still doing below our all-time high. So we've got to get back to 2.2 first of all, because we can really say Nigeria is actually growing output. And while we're not growing output, illegal bunkering is a big, big, big culprit while we're not growing output. We've got to secure the delta so that every oil pumped is every oil sold so revenues can come in. Now, let's go back to the pricing. Remember, the US is going to start to export oil. Ukraine and Russia might hit a peace deal. Russia has already tied up India with a 10-year supply of 500,000 barrels, a barrel deal with India. That might mean that Nigeria can meet its output target, but prices will fall or we have no market. So we've got to move very, very fast to lock up markets, not just to get the products out there, but to lock up markets because now we have two players coming back into the global market. So markets might be taken up by the time we get there. So that's my fear really that the prices are going to fall and we might have production, but prices have come down and our big players have been taken over by folks offering them discounts that from what Nigeria sells, which is the Brent crude, which is a very, very good blend. So it's not something we can control, but we can try to get back. Even if we do the 2 million barrels per day, and we can give it to Dangote to refine locally, those byproducts are going to be available for exports, which also bring revenues back to Nigeria. So we really don't lose if we produce more oil, but we just have to produce more oil to that get back to that 2005 minimum, about 2.2 million barrels per day at least here.
Okay, so food inflation is one of the main factors driving inflation in Nigeria, and farmers have attributed it to their inability to go to the farms because of insecurity. Now, the 2025 budget allocates a substantial sum to defense and security sector. That's about 4.91 trillion naira. Now, how important is this investment in the context of Nigeria's economic growth, and do you think the allocation will effectively address the country's security challenges?
Yeah, I mean, right now, that's the most important allocation if you look at it that way, because I'm thinking in my mind, and I hope that's what they're saying, that they're going to allocate money into insecurity so they can go after the bandits and ensure there's peace in the middle belt, in the north, so that food output can increase. Remember, agriculture is 20% of our GDP, is the largest contributor to employment in Nigeria. So if you fix the insecurity, you are fixing inflation, you are fixing GDP, you are fixing unemployment all at one go. So I'm thinking if that's the plan and we want to spend this money to ensure there's no more internal strife of third-party actors in Nigeria, then it's money well spent. But again, it has to go back to implementation. We've been fighting Boko Haram, ISIS, bandits for decades now, and they're still there. So we'll just have to pray, hope, and support our troops and the president that we're able to go in there and ensure there's peace so farmers can go back to farm, food price can come low, and then inflation can come low. Once we get inflation down, then good things start to happen. We can't plan with 30% inflation. It's not just not possible. So that's the most important part of the budget. And I think that's why they put it up ahead. And I hope they are able to achieve that aim. Otherwise, the economy really can't go anywhere.
Now, so far, the Apex Bank has increased the MPR about 6 times this year. Now, what role do you think the CBN can play in supporting the goals outlined in the 2025 budget moving forward? Do you think the monetary policy should be adjusted again to complement the fiscal strategies being proposed in the budget?
Yes, look at it this way. The CBN's job is inflation, right? So they are worried about monetary expansion and high inflation. And the way CBN fights inflation is to raise interest rates. But when you raise interest rates, SMEs, of course, can't borrow. Nobody can borrow at 30% and make a profit. So you fight monetary expansion, but you kill the SMEs. And the CBN cannot grow food. The CBN has no control over the food growing areas in Nigeria to say it can affect food output. So perhaps it's time to maybe pull back. CBN can say we are being restrictive and we really can't affect inflation because inflation keeps on going up and we keep on raising rates. We are killing growth, but we're not fighting inflation. Perhaps the CBN should start to reduce rates to support the fiscal side, to support low credit, so that the SMEs can start to grow. Will there be inflation? Yes. But currently, the CBN cannot fight inflation by just raising interest rate, the MPR. It's not going to be possible. Perhaps we now go back to focusing on growth just to complement the fiscal side, whilst we let the security guys go after the bandits to bring down the cost of food. So essentially, it's going to be, since we can't fix inflation through monetary means, let's go after growth and try to at least get people employed in Nigeria. No one can employ any that's SMEs if interest rates are 30%. It's just too restrictive for growth. It's cheaper to take your money, put it in the bank and earn interest than open up a business and paying 30%. If everybody puts money in the bank, of course, nobody employs anyone. They're not going to be any factories running. So we have to maybe, CBN maybe has got to play, look at that and say, okay, can we be more accommodative in terms of the monetary stance? Yeah.
Right, so the budget speaks to a vision of sustainable economic growth. And when we started the program, you mentioned that the budget is a good one. What do you think are the risks that could derail this plan? And how can the Nigerian government mitigate this risk moving forward?
There are just really two risks really here. Nigeria is a derivative of crude oil. If the crude oil prices stay up and we get our output up, we're going to have a good budget, even if we're paying high amounts to debt service. That's really it. If this 2025 starts out and crude oil prices start to go down, we're in deep trouble. That's the point I'm making. It's only good because of factors we cannot control. We've allowed ourselves to become an economy with just one major product, that's oil and gas, and we don't control the price. We might control output, not the price. So if oil prices stay high, 75, 80, and we're able to do output, we are good. If they start to go down, even if we are prudent, we're going to suffer because we have a deficit budget, and the entire budget is based on us exporting crude oil, getting revenues in to service debt and to pay salaries before we even then borrow to do capital projects. So you see how it's all tied in to that price and the output of oil. So that says a very, very dicey budget. It's good in terms of want to spend. I wish we can spend more because we're in a quote unquote industrial recession, sort of. And to get out, we have to spend more to get the young folks with jobs, with infrastructure, so that the economy is humming. We're not spending a lot and we're borrowing a lot. So it's either we go big or we go home. That's really what I'd like to say on that.
Okay, so just before I let you go, Mr. Aja, now what are your projections for Nigeria's economy in 2025 generally?
I like that Dangote is now operating in Nigeria because what's going to happen is that the issues we had in the past with the import of PMS is gone. Dangote is also, if he can get the crude oil he needs to refine and export byproducts, we're going to have a new revenue line in Nigeria, which is going to be the export of byproducts. Remember that for almost 22 decades, we've not had NNPC refineries working, so no exports of byproducts. We've had LME, but not in the scale that Dangote is doing with the petrochemicals and the fertilizer. So imagine if Dangote is working at maybe half or three-quarter capacity. That's a new dollar revenue line coming in that I'm sure even the budget has not taken into account. So that's a big, big, big positive right there. If we can stop imports of PMS, that's another big positive. So those are the positive sides that we have, that Dangote is operating and all that. The negatives, in my view, is that we still have not decoupled the economy away from crude oil. If anything happens to crude oil, Nigeria is going to really suffer. So if you weigh those two together, it's really that our fate is up in the air. I'm optimistic with remittances, things can get better, but we've got to change the economy away from depending on crude oil and gas and just having the natural entrepreneurial capacity of Nigerians be put to work. But lots of young folks here that can do entertainment, that can do IT. We've got to create new economies in Nigeria so we stop the oil thing. So well, I'm optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic in terms of where oil prices will be in 2025. I'll say 40%.
Well, let's hope that things get better in 2025. Financial analyst Kalu Aja, many thanks for lending your thoughts on the program.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. Well, that's it on this episode of the program. Many thanks for joining us. I'm Okpeyemi Owoseni. See you next time.